This is
Cast.
Hello there, and welcome to the Season 2 premiere of my podcast Racing. I've decided to continue on this pattern of releasing a minimum of 10 episodes of the podcast at a time, taking a hiatus of at least 2 to 3 months, and then releasing 10 more episodes, and so on and so forth, until I get tired of making the podcast. But I can't see myself really getting tired anytime soon of making this podcast, and I really enjoy making it a lot, talking about movies with friends and movie related news and topics and all that, and so on and so forth. And I really like doing this, and that is thanks to all of you out there for listening and being so supportive. I really appreciate you all. Now, before I get into today's topic, I want to share a brief announcement with you all. So far, I've been releasing the podcast exclusively on YouTube, but sometime before the end of 2021, Podcast Racing will have another home. Besides YouTube, the podcast will also be available on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Anchor or some other podcast site. It will not be available on SoundCloud because you can only upload a certain amount of hours on there for free, and I do not want to pay to upload the entire podcast there. So I will let you guys know, hopefully by the end of summer or beginning of fall, when and where I will be releasing the podcast. Okay, on to today's topic. Top 10 favorite scenes from movies that I saw in 2020 with a US release date in a theater, streaming service, or film festival. Now, obviously, I've not been able to see every film from last year. In fact, a notable film that I really wanted to see but couldn't was Shiva Baby. I tried to get tickets to this, but at every US film festival, virtual film festival that I tried to buy a ticket to Shiva Baby for, it was sold out. So, unfortunately, I'll have to wait until later this year to see that one, whether it be on demand or streaming. And unlike other YouTube movie reviewers, I decided not to make a top 10 movies or shows of 2020 video because I knew that I was going to make the montage video and release my ranked list of all 2020 movies I saw. So I felt like making a top 10 video would have just been redundant. But just in case you haven't seen that video, which is in the description of this episode, in the description below, just in case you haven't seen that video or looked at my ranked list, I'll briefly share now my top 10 favorite movies from 2020. Minari, Feels Good Man, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Palm Springs, And Then We Danced, Soul, Nomadland, Another Round, Crazy World, Lovers Rock, and if I were counting Hamilton as an actual movie, that would be my number one favorite movie of the year. But my favorite movie from 2020 is Lovers Rock, available on Amazon Prime. Alright, finally, onto the topic of today's episode, my top 10 favorite scenes from 2020 movies. Now, despite the fact that COVID really affected 2020 negatively and a lot of movies were delayed, pushed back, etc., there were actually a lot of pretty good movies that I saw this year. Well, to be fair, I was very picky and selective with what I saw this year. I purposely decided not to watch stuff like Trolls World Tour or whatever that was released on demand. I haven't seen The Croods 2 yet and News of the World yet. Although those two I am going to watch at some point. But despite the fact that a lot of movies were delayed, and I purposely did not watch other movies, I still was able to see quite a few notable and impressive movies this year with a lot of individual moments and scenes in said films that affected me and, again, really impressed me a lot. So before I name my favorite scenes, I want to share some honorable mentions. Oh, and by the way, spoilers. I will be sharing spoilers for some of these movies. I will include the titles of the movies in the description. So if you see a title of a movie in the description that you really want to see, that you haven't seen yet, then just look in the description and then wait to watch this episode until you've seen said movie. Alright, so honorable mentions. The ending of Babyteeth was really heartbreaking, really effective, and wrapped things up not in a nice little bow, but it was, in my opinion, and a really sad but appropriate way to end the movie. The ending of Bill and Ted Face the Music. I actually really like this one a lot more than other people. And I understand, why a lot of people didn't like this movie. And some people are even disappointed by the ending song. And I do think that the ending song could have been better, but I just had a lot of fun with it, and I was nodding my head along with the song at the end. I still thought that it was impressive. The scene in Boy State when Steven calls his mom and he says that when he's crying, but he's not, as he tells her that he's not crying because he lost, he's crying because of this immense, wonderful opportunity that he had and that he came really close. The fact that he even came a little bit close got him emotional. The monologue from Paul when he's on his own in The Five Bloods. Delroy Lindo did a phenomenal job in The Five Bloods. And yeah, it is an Oscar-y moment, but sometimes Oscar-y moments are really impressive. Well, a lot of times they're really impressive, even if they feel slightly exploitative. I thought that Delroy Lindo did a really great job, and his monologue when he's on his own in the Vietnamese jungle, really impressive. Extraction was a pretty terrible movie overall, but that one take car chase was really impressive, and kudos to Sam Hargrave for actually strapping himself to the car with the camera filming it, and you the man, man. The ending of Feels Good Man, I thought was, it got me emotional a little bit, and I hope that the real life creator of Pepe the Frog is doing alright, and I hope that no one ever bastardizes your creations ever again. The Mavis scene from Love and Monsters when the main character, Dylan O'Brien's character, goes to meets the Mavis robot, and she shows him the pictures of his parents who he hasn't seen in years. I almost teared up. The P scene from The Midnight Sky, which was a really disappointing movie. I was really looking forward to this one actually. I was really rooting for George Clooney, and it wasn't bad. It was just really dull, and the Felicity Jones storyline was pointless in my opinion. It should have just focused exclusively on George Clooney's character, but the scene where he and the little girl fling peas at each other was really cute. The titular scene in Never Rarely, Sometimes Always, where Cindy Flanagan's character, and she did a really great job by the way, Cindy Flanagan's character, she's asked to answer a bunch of questions with the words never, rarely, sometimes, or always. And then as she's answering these questions, she starts to finally break down because her character is very jaded and emotionless on the surface, but then she finally starts breaking down and comes to terms with what unfortunately happens with her. And it was a really powerful scene, really well done. The one and only Ivan, again, another movie. I wasn't really looking forward to this one, but I thought that the true story was pretty remarkable, and I like Bryan Cranston a lot. But the movie overall, it was just boring and not funny, and I can't really imagine kids really liking this one. But the scene towards the end, when Ivan is finally home, back in the jungle again, back in the wilderness, I thought that that was really nice to see him, finally back where he belongs. One Night in Miami, the scene where the Sam Cooke is performing and Malcolm X is in the audience, and the musical equipment, the electronical equipment, whatever, it goes out basically. The microphones don't work and all that, and so Sam Cooke has to improvise to not get the crowd. The crowd's getting really angry and stuff, but then he improvises this song, and that was a pretty cool moment. The ending of Onward was definitely the best scene in that movie. A lot of people agree with me. A lot of people think that, including me, that the movie overall, it has issues. It's one of Pixar's weaker films, but that ending was pretty effective. And I thought that was really clever, and I did tear up a little bit. The This is kind of a tie between two very awesome songs from the Phineas and Ferb movie Candace Against the Universe, which was released exclusively on Disney Plus. Us Against the Universe and Adulting. Both are great songs. One great for a very different reason than the other. I think that Jeff Swampy Marsh and Dan Povenmire, I think that's what their names are, the creators of Phineas and Ferb. They did a great job with the voice acting, and them and the entire writing and musical staff of Phineas and Ferb did a great job with the movie overall and these great songs. And my final honorable mention is the ending of Sound of Metal, where Ruben finally accepts his fate and he learns to be appreciative of what he's still got. And yeah, losing his hearing was a really uh, unfortunately bad thing that he had to go through, but he still has his girlfriend, he still has his eyesight, and he's able to appreciate the things that he does have, and hopefully live a fruitful life after the movie ends. Alright, so those are my honorable mentions. Like I said before, there were surprisingly many moments that I thought were really effective individual moments in these movies, even though the movies themselves weren't that good or even bad. But yeah, onto my favorite scenes from 2020 movies. My 10th favorite scene from a 2020 movie is from a movie that I felt really mixed about. I thought that half of this movie was really good and half of this movie was really bad, and that is the movie The Half of It on Netflix, and yes, that was a pun. The half of it, man, like I really want to like this movie. I thought that the two main characters, Ellie and Paul, I think, were really great, but unfortunately, the love interest Aster was a really bland character. They tried to make her interesting and more three-dimensional, but unfortunately, it didn't. I just didn't care about her. I was way more invested in what was going on with Ellie, with her dad, and with Paul. I thought that their dynamic was really cool, except for when Paul tried to kiss Ellie. That was just weird. But the ending where Paul's running by the train. Earlier in the movie, Ellie and Paul are watching a romantic movie together, romantic comedy, I think, or something. They're watching some romantic movie, and then there's that cliche at the end where the the man is running after the woman by the train, and they're talking about how much of a dumb cliche that is. But then at the end of the movie, Paul, as a final joke and also friendly farewell to Ellie, who's going off to college at this point, I think, he's running by the train, and then she's laughing at how ridiculous he looks, but then she starts crying because she appreciates how much he cares about her and how close that they become as friends. My ninth favorite scene from a 2020 movie is the funeral, quote unquote funeral, at the end of Dick Johnson is Dead, where Dick Johnson is still alive, but they host a funeral for him. And then there's that one friend of his who just can't stop crying. It was a simultaneously funny and sad scene, and I hope that Kirsten Johnson, the son of son, sorry, I'm so sorry, the daughter of Dick Johnson is doing okay, and I hope that Dick Johnson is in heaven celebrating if he did indeed pass away. The movie didn't quite clarify whether he did actually die or not. My eighth favorite scene is the running with the wolves scene from Wolfwalkers. I was really impressed with this movie, not just for the gorgeous animation, but the wonderful music, and the story isn't the most like original story from a cartoon saloon animated film, but I really liked the story and I really liked the characters and the scene when I can't remember the main character's name, but the scene where she has turned into a wolf and she and Maeve are running together through the forest, and the Aurora cover of Running with the Wolves was playing. I really like that moment a lot. My seventh favorite scene, the ending of The Father, when Anthony Hopkins has finally been, they finally decide, his family has finally decided to put him into a nursing home, and then he's at his worst mentally. His character's been dealing with dementia throughout the entire movie, and he's finally just starts to break down, and he feels so alone, and he's crying for his mommy. I actually cried watching that. I was so heartbroken. Anthony Hopkins' acting was so convincing that I thought that for a second during that scene, I thought that this was actually a real person and that the movie is actually based on true story. And it probably is, even though the character himself is a fictionalized character. Unfortunately, many people with dementia probably go through and feel like what Anthony Hopkins' character, Anthony, in The Father went through. And the ending of The Father was really emotionally effective and is my seventh favorite scene in a 2020 movie. My sixth favorite scene in a 2020 movie is the club scene from Bad Education when Hugh Jackman's character, he's completely backed up against the wall. He knows that he's gonna go to jail, that he can no longer get away with what he's gone away with for the movie, and so he goes to the club with his lover, and played by Raphael Castel, who was amazing in Blind Spotting. He and David Diggs need to make more movies together. But anyways, the club scene in Bad Education where it's intercut between Hugh Jackman's colleagues getting arrested and then him having his final dance with the one who he feels like he truly loves. Even though Hugh Jackman's character Frank is a terrible person in real life and in the movie, I still felt a little bad for him by the during the club scene because it did seem like he's not completely heartless even though he's done some really terrible things, and it did seem like when he first started teaching, when he first became a superintendent, that he did genuinely care for his students' well-being and doing the right thing. But then somewhere along the line, whether it be dealing with parents who act like total Karens and the stress of overseeing a school district and all that, he just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna look out for myself now. And the club scene did bring back a little bit of his humanity, and I really liked that. My fifth favorite scene in a 2020 movie is when the family in Minari go to go to American church. They're the only Asians in the entire church, and they have a bunch of awkward encounters with that one white kid staring at the son David, just staring at him. And but then later they become best friends in the movie, and then the mom interacting the Korean mom interacting with the two other white moms, and then she's saying that she doesn't speak very good English, and but then the two other moms are like, "Oh my gosh, you're so cute! Oh, ha ha ha!" and all that stuff. Minari is surprisingly, I thought when I first saw this movie that it would be in my top five favorite movies of the year because it was so amazing and it's not perfect, but I really loved it a lot. Even though my experience as a Korean American is not exactly like the experience of this family in Minari, I still could relate a lot to a lot of moments in this movie when David's being punished, when they force him to raise his arms up, when they make David go get the stick that they're going to hit him with. That's stuff that happened to me in my childhood. My parents would punish me by making me go onto my knees, raise my hands up, and then grab the very thing that they were going to spank me with. I could relate a lot to being the only Asian in a church. I grew up in an all Korean church, but during like college and even during high school, I went to other churches where I was the only Korean, and people like no one was being malicious about it, but they brought that up. Like they made me, people in these churches unintentionally made me feel alone because they brought up the fact that I was Korean. They, asked me about it, and I just wanted to blend in. I wanted to be like everybody else, but then, they the people in these churches didn't realize that, and they brought up the fact that I was Korean, and it made me feel like I really stuck out, and I didn't want to stick out. I wanted to blend in. I wanted to be like everybody else, and technically I was like everybody else because I do consider myself an American, like these people in these white churches or Hispanic churches that I visited during college and high school and whatever. Uh, they probably think of themselves as American. They definitely think of themselves as Christians, and that's a mindset that we all should be sharing. But I have a feeling that many of these people in these other churches saw myself solely as a Korean and not a fellow American or really a fellow Christian. And I'm not saying that they were evil for thinking that way, but I think that it is an unfortunate mindset, especially if you're white and growing up in America, to a very narrow-minded mindset to have. And I don't think that you're evil for thinking that way, but it did kind of affect me negatively. Those of you listening who I went to these churches with, it did kind of hurt a little to just to keep pointing out that I'm the only Korean at that church, and that and that I'm not necessarily like the same as you guys. And I know that you guys weren't saying that, oh, I'm inferior than you because I'm different. Like I know you guys weren't saying that, but it did hurt a little, and but it was a great learning experience, even if at the time I just wanted to be, elsewhere at times. But it was a great learning experience, and my own personal experiences were made the church scene and many other moments in Minari so much more effective. Oh, and if you think that I'm pronouncing Minari wrong, no, you got, Minari is not how you say the film's title. It's actually Minari. Minari is a very, very fermented, very strong herb that's usually exclusively grown in Korea. My fourth favorite scene in a 2020 movie is the moments in the Steve McQueen film Lovers Rock, which is part of the Small Axe anthology film series, which all deal with unfortunate racism in London. In Lovers Rock, they're dancing and singing along to silly games, but then the DJ stops playing the music, but everybody in the audience, all the partygoers, still sing along to silly games anyway. And me at home watching on my laptop on Amazon Prime, I felt like, despite the fact that I wasn't watching this in the theater or on a big screen TV, I still felt like I was amongst the partygoers, partying along with them, and I actually started singing out loud to silly games, to silly games, even though I was watching on my laptop and even though I wasn't actually there. Steve McQueen did a great job of with all these films, really, with immersing me in the world, which and many of these films were unfortunately based on true story. A lot of them are not the happiest films, but Lovers Rock was definitely is most optimistic film to date and is his most impressive film to date. Although some would consider it to be a TV episode, I'm counting the Small X films as actual movies. And when the music stopped and when everybody was singing silly games, still kept singing silly games, I was singing along and I was loving it. My third favorite scene is the ending of And Then We Danced. Funny enough is that despite me being a Christian, some of my favorite movies are movies, LGBT positive movies, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Call Me by Your Name, Love Simon, Moonlight, and and then we danced. And then we danced was a really impressive film. It did kind of drag a little bit in the third act, but the ending when the main character finally just doesn't care anymore about tradition, feels liberated through his experiences with his an affair with his male dance partner. at the end, when he has to perform the traditional Georgian dance, he decides to just start improvising and just start dancing whatever he wants to, and it does upset his superiors, but he just feels liberated at this point, and it's heavily implied that he just goes forward with life, with being he who he wants to be and who he feels like he deserves to be. And I thought it was a really great moment, the ending of And Then We Danced. My second favorite scene from a 2020 movie is the epiphany scene from Soul when after Joe finally achieved what he thought his dream was by performing with Dorothy Williams. He performs, he has it's a great successful night, but he doesn't feel 100% fulfilled. He goes home kind of dejected after hearing the fish story from Dorothy Williams, which that was a bit of a random on the nose moment, but it leads up to my favorite scene from Soul, which is when he suddenly has this epiphany that his purpose in life is not to play piano and perform jazz with Dorothy Williams. His purpose in life, and everybody's purpose in life really, is to live life to the fullest, and he realizes that while playing the piano, and the scene is accompanied by the amazing score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. As he's playing the piano, it plays a montage of him throughout his entire life. His dad unfortunately passing away, him realizing why he loves piano, why he loves jazz, and he ends up also replaying some earlier moments of 22 inside Joe's body, really learning to live and appreciate life. And the epiphany scene helps him motivate him to return to the soul world and save 22, who at this point has become a lost soul. It was a really powerful scene. It's almost my favorite scene from a 2020 movie, but my favorite scene from all of 2020 movies is the ending of Another Round when we see some really great dance moves from Mads Mikkelsen. uh, I had no idea that he was a dancer, but apparently the director Thomas Vinterberg and Mads are actually really good friends. I know that they collaborated before in the movie The Hunt, which I still haven't seen yet, but I really got to. They've collaborated before, but I didn't realize that they're actually really close friends. And Thomas Vinterberg knew that Mads was a dancer at one point, and so uh, he decided to specifically write a scene of Mads dancing, and it was a really great scene. And the movie, I going into Another Round, I thought it was gonna be a scathing criticism of like alcohol culture in Denmark, and addressing and portraying alcoholism, but the movie doesn't 100% portray alcohol as something that's like awful and life ruining. Drinking a low or moderate amount can be positive sometimes, and I think Thomas Vinterberg didn't want to completely portray alcohol as like something that was really bad, and that was most exemplified by Mads Mikkelsen not being completely drunk at the end, but getting a little bit tipsy, but not doing anything bad. He's dancing and he's celebrating along with his students who have all passed their exams, and he's dancing along to the song "What a Life" by Scarlet Pleasure, which is a great song. He's dancing. He's free. He's a little bit tipsy, but he's happy, and he's not doing any harm to himself or anyone. And it was a really great scene, and one of surprisingly many moments from 2020 films. And like I said before, despite a lot of films that I really want to see, like French Dispatch, Dune, Black Widow, Eternals, etc., getting pushed back and pushed back. No Time to Die. There were still some really great movies and moments that I was fortunately able to watch in 2020, and I hope that all of you were able to or are able to get to see some really great films from last year and this year despite the pandemic. And those were my top 10 favorite scenes from 2020 movies that were released in the US in streaming, theater, or film festival. Please let me know down below what are some of your favorite movies or scenes from 2020 movies specifically. I hope that all of you are doing well, staying safe out there, social distancing, wearing a mask. And yeah, I look forward to sharing more episodes with you guys for season 2 of my podcast Racing, every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time. Bye.